Thank you very much, Dr. Vaibhav Sabnis, for having put me on the pedestal. Uh, I am a very small entity vis-a-vis the brilliant resource persons who have already illuminated today's topic for this national webinar, that is communicative competence in English. I would like to say all the participants in this national webinar a very good morning. Honorable Principal V.Y. Bhiram from Dr. B. Babasaheb Ambedkar Memorial College of Law, Dhule. Principal B. Yuva Kumar Reddy, SS Maniyar Law College, Jalgaon. And my fellow travelers, two resource persons for this national webinar, Dr. V. Raju Nayak from Hyderabad and Dr. Samapika Das Biswas from Kolkata. And the two very energetic and jubilant coordinators of this national webinar, Professor Ganpat Dhumale and my dear friend and chum, Dr. Vaibhav Sabnis from Dhule, and all the faculty of these two colleges. Apart from them, there are delegates I can see, and there are students as well. I think my job has half done by, even more than half done by the resource persons for today's webinar. They have illuminated the essence of the topic chosen for this national webinar. And I think this has been a very successful academic event. Okay, my topic for today's, actually it's a subtopic for today's exposition happens to be effective communication in English. I have prepared a small PPT. I would like to share the PPT. If at all I am allowed to share the PPT, I have it with me on the screen. Can I do that, Professor Dhumale?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, sir. So are you going to share the PPT? Shall I share it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now I'm ready.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm the host now. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, just a minute. I will be presenting to all of you. Okay. Okay. Is the screen visible to all of you?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay. Thanks a lot. So my subtopic for today's interaction is effective communication in English. I'm really particular about my presentations because I know that by the time the presentation is over, the participants must stand to gain a few insights into the topic or subtopic that has been chosen for a particular exposition. So the outcomes of the presentation, you can see, this will help the participants understand the process of communication. They will get familiar with the parameters for effective communication, and they will get to know how to avoid the barriers to effective communication as well. There are a few definitions, and these are stereotypical definitions that I have compiled from different sources. So we know communication, and of course, all the dignified participants in this national webinar know quite well what communication is all about. So it's a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. And there is one very beautiful definition given by Lewis A. Allen, one of the management authors of America. He says that communication is the sum of all the things one person does when he wants to create understanding in the mind of another. It involves a systematic and continuous process of telling, listening, and understanding. So you can see, as a process, communication has different constituents, different elements. The imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or signs happens to be the gist of communication. And there is another definition by a very scintillating and brilliant personality from America, once again, Tony Robbins. He's actually Anthony Robbins. He says that the way we communicate with others and with ourselves ultimately determines the quality of our lives. So you can see how communication plays a very important role in our life. And we know that only human beings make use of languages as a sophisticated, advanced means of communication. One of the very stereotypical, you call it analysis of the communication process is often taken from Roma Jakobsa, a Russian-born American literary theorist and, of course, linguist. And he has put forward a very wonderful analysis of the communication process, in which there are 7 different constituents. There is a sender who sends a message by making use of the sounds of a language or the signs accepted by a language. And then the message is encoded. So code is used, the language that is used for communication or any other means of communication than language is also possible here as far as encoding is concerned. And then there is a channel, a medium is used to put forward this message towards the receiver, and the receiver receives it and decodes it. And there is a reaction given, which is supposed to be the feedback in the technical terminology. So this is something that you might have already got familiar with, because Roma Jakobsa happens to be a very famous personality in the world of literary theories and linguistics as well. And his analysis of the communication process has been frequently used in these types of expositions. Now you can see the features of communication, because the topic for this national webinar happens to be communicative competence. So we have to throw light on the features of communication. We know that communication, especially in language, as an advanced and sophisticated means of communication, for that matter, is essentially a human phenomenon. We don't mean to say that non-human beings, for that matter, or animals don't use a means of communication. They do use means of communication. Their own animal communication system is there. But as far as language is concerned, you can see this is our answer to God the Almighty. If you look at the origin of languages, so many languages, thousands of languages are used in the world. If you consider the Indian situation, right, more than 20 languages have been recognized by the Constitution of India, and there are hundreds of languages, which are used in India. If you consider my place, Solapur, which is also called Sholapur all over the world, the people from this part of Maharashtra are known for their typical mindset, as it is said by one of the famous Urdu shayars, that Shola hu bhadakne ki guzarish nahi karta. Shola hu bhadakne ki guzarish nahi karta. Okay, sometimes I keep forgetting the lines. It happens. But the typical mindset of Solapuri people, it's because of the multilingual situation of Solapur. And more than half a dozen languages are used in Solapur. Marathi, Hindi, Kannada, Telugu, Banjara, Urdu, English for that matter as well. शोला हूँ भड़कने की गुजारिश नहीं करता, सच मुंह से निकल जाता है, कोशिश नहीं करता. That is what I wanted to recite, because while introducing, Professor Sabnis said that I know a little bit of Urdu. I'm a practitioner of this language. It's a very beautiful, poetic language. So this is the typical mindset of the people in Solapur, because so many languages are used in Solapur, and there is one very beautiful theory. This is, of course, an imaginary theory about the origin of language. Once upon a time, long back, all the people in this world used to speak only one language, right? And they decided to build a tall tower kissing the heavens itself. And God came to know about this, because God happens to be omniscient, right? And then God, had a solution to this particular problem, because if at all human beings were able to build this tower kissing the heavens, there would not be any importance of heavens. There would not be any importance of gods and goddesses, for that matter. Entire divinity, for that matter, would be destroyed because of the human interference. So what did the God do? God simply sent a messenger, an angel, to this planet called the Earth. Just imagine, all the people were using one language then, and the messenger came on the planet called the Earth, and he simply whispered different languages into the ears of the people. people started to use different languages, and there was a confusion, twice confounding. And the idea of building the tall tower, for that matter, kissing the heavens itself, was automatically dismantled. Now, this is a very funny, you call it theory of the origin of different languages, but you can see language happens to be essentially a human phenomenon. Non-human beings cannot make use of language, for that matter. You can teach a few animals, for that matter, your language. For example, parrots, you can teach parrot, any language for that matter. The parrot can utter the sounds of a particular language, but the parrot doesn't understand what it is uttering, my dear friends. So this is basically essentially a human phenomenon. Now you can see communication is an essential aspect of human life. So you can see without communication, right from dawn to dusk, we keep communicating. We either keep communicating with one another, or if there is nobody around in these times, as that has been rightly pointed out by Dr. Samapika, pandemic times, critical times, right? You are the only person sitting back home and you interact with yourself, right? So communication is quite essential. It is a bilateral process. We know the gist of this particular statement, because you cannot talk to wilderness. You cannot communicate in the desert, for that matter. You cannot talk to the empty walls, for that matter. So a person is required, for that matter. And the person should belong to your language family, my dear friends. Otherwise, there cannot be perfect communication. It's a process. I can say communication happens to be a process, and we have already seen how we can understand communication as a process. In Marathi, you call it prakriya, right? Now, the communication, for that matter, has different types: verbal, written, or non-verbal communication. We will come back to this point afterwards. And you can see communication always requires a context, right? So whenever there is a context, we make use of a language. Somebody has rightly said, there cannot be a text without context. And every text has a subtext as well. So you can see how this context plays a very important role. It makes communication reasonable. It makes communication rational, right? So context is quite necessary, and communication has become a precondition to success, a prerequisite to success, for that matter, because you have knowledge, you acquire knowledge, but if you are not able to communicate, as it was rightly pointed out by both the principals of these two colleges, that you have been, producing lawyers, you have been producing advocates, legal practitioners. What the legal practitioners use is supposed to be a domain, it's a register, it's a variety of language. It's called legalese. Do you know legalese? Legalese happens to be the language of a lawyer, language of an advocate. And you can see the functions of legalese. The primary function of this domain happens to be referential. You keep referring to different rules and regulations, articles, and a number of legal provisions, for that matter. One very important thing that both the principals pointed out at the very outset of this very wonderful webinar was that they said that the lawyers are expected to convince the judges. They are expected to persuade the judges, right, in favor of them. Now, this is supposed to be a very important area where communication, and that too, effective communication, as far as legal practitioners are concerned, advocates and lawyers are concerned, plays a very important role. The success of a lawyer depends upon how good a communicator he or she is. So you can see good communication, effective communication, for that matter, and good persuasion, convincing by making use of language. What the advocate does in a court, for that matter, of law, he interprets law, and law, for that matter, is made up of language. Are you getting my point? And you can see laws are interpreted, legal provisions are interpreted by making use of language. This is supposed to be the meta-linguistic function of legalese, my dear friends. So if you understand, I'm not trying to tell the legal practitioners, for that matter, the future advocates and lawyers, that they must know all these technical jargons, but they must know, if at all they want to be successful legal practitioners, they have to keep these three very important aspects of their variety of language at the back of their minds. Number one, your language, legalese for that matter, is there to refer to legal provisions. It is supposed to be the referential function. The second important function of legalese happens to be metalinguistic function. And the third important function, I'm talking about, yes, the success mantra as far as the legal practitioners are concerned. It is supposed to be the conative function. You have to convince, you have to persuade the judges, in favor of your clients. Yes, you call it. So you can see how this might be a deviation. It may sound a deviation for you, but I think this is a very important aspect as far as the legal practitioners are concerned. You can see there are types of communication. We see verbal or oral communication, and there are different examples that we can see. Intrapersonal. Now again, see, this communication plays a very important role in our life. As it is said, a person who can interact with himself effectively is able to interact with others effectively. So you can say intrapersonal communication and interpersonal communication. So the people who participate in a communication activity are called interlocutors, right? Interlocutors. It's a technical term once again. So again, see, I must be able to interact with myself successfully, effectively, properly, so that I can interact with others in a systematic manner. There is a very wonderful share in Urdu regarding communication. I keep reciting this share at different places, different platforms for that matter. Apna kaha, gar aap samjhe to kya samjhe. Apna kaha, gar aap samjhe to kya samjhe. Maza कहने का तभी है जब आप कहे और दूसरा समझे. I can say this is almost like the gist of effective communication. Are you getting my point, my dear friends? Okay, so intrapersonal communication. I must be able to understand myself. I must be able to, yes, realize myself. Just as Prince Siddhartha sat under the Bodhisattva tree, held penances, went for meditation, and he had his realization in the same manner. I know who I am, where I am, what I am, and why I am. These are the questions that must haunt you, and you must be able to answer these questions because we are human beings and we are different from other beings. So you can see verbal or oral communication makes use of sounds. Now you can see as far as English is concerned, there is no one-to-one correspondence between the sounds that we utter when we speak English and the signs that we make use of while we write English. Now, if you look at the reality of English, if you see other languages like Marathi and Hindi, you can see the speech sounds in Marathi have a relevance, have a perfect correspondence for that matter to the number of letters in the Marathi alphabet, right? 40 odd letters of alphabet are there. But as far as English is concerned, that is a big problem that the new learners of English face, whether it is India or non-India for that matter. You can see there is no perfect correspondence between the way we speak English and the way we write English because of a very important reality that the English alphabet, which is made up of 26 letters, and the English sound system. Every language has its own sound system, and English sound system has got 44 speech sounds, my dear friends. 26 letters on the one hand and 44 speech sounds on the other hand. So that's a big problem for the new learners because English is not spoken as it is written, and vice versa. It is not written as it is spoken for that matter. You can see oral and verbal communication has to be properly, systematically acquired if at all you want to be effective in communication in English. Then comes group communication. You have a group of people for that matter. Press conference is there, or a meeting for that matter is there. and you are expected to use the oral communication, verbal communication, and interact with a measured number of people over there. And then comes public interaction and public speaking for that matter. So you can see oral communication, and for this particular area, people must be, for that matter, very much careful. They must see the pronunciation. I can see the very word pronunciation is not properly pronounced in India. India is a very wonderful nation, my dear friends. We go to South India. South Indians have got their own typical pronunciations. They never say a very simple word. I was listening to one of the resource person coming from Kerala, and there was a very simple word, film. It's only film, right? It's a monosyllabic word. It has only one syllable. But throughout the presentation, the resource person, of course, it's not his fault. It's because of the mother tongue pull that he kept pronouncing this word as film, film. And if you go to North India, Punjabis, for example, they are known for their own wonderful pronunciation, my dear friends. There is a very simple word, SALAD. We are talking about oral communication, and you see what oral communication is all about, and the scenario that we see in India. SALAD is a very simple word. It is salad. But if you go to North India, especially in Punjab and Haryana, they say salad. They never say salad. They say salad. Two consonants are brought together, right? They are clubbed together. But if you look at the other words like Virendra, they never say Virendra. They say Virender, Dharmender, Narendra, right? So you can see this is typical scenario of India. So I don't say that we can acquire standard pronunciation, received pronunciation for that matter. We cannot speak like an Englishman, and we are not expected to speak like an Englishman for that matter. But we have to see that we pronounce English in a systematic manner. We are not required to imitate the original speakers of English, my dear friends. But Maharashtra happens to be a place where I may be biased in my opinion, my dear friends, where a kind of standard pronunciation can be heard. Okay. Now, again, see, another type of communication happens to be written communication, and all of us know a lot about written communication. We make use of the signs, the letters of alphabet accepted by language, and you can see the examples here. Business transaction or business correspondence makes use of. Now, in the olden times, people used to teach writing, and it was really a very fantastic situation, because people, if you consider period almost 20 or 30 years ago, people used to write letters, people used to exchange letters, and they were taught how to write letters. Now, I think this is the right time in the 21st century, when digital communication has given us, a different instant means of communicating with one another. We have to teach our kids, our children, our students how to write letters, right? Okay. So written communication has its own types for that matter. I will go through my presentation fast because I know I have been given 30 minutes for my exposition, my dear friends. So non-verbal communication, someone has rightly said, there is an expert opinion that when we speak a language, only 7% of the gist of what we want to say, 7% of the meaning is communicated with the help of words. The remaining 90 to 93% of the gist of what I want to say is communicated by means of different non-verbal, platforms. So you can see non-verbal communication happens to be a very important aspect of communication. Of course, verbal communication and written communication play their own roles for that matter, but they must be accompanied, they must be supplanted by means of different non-verbal arrangements, different non-verbal provisions that we have. You can see kinesics. At present, I'm using my hands. I'm using entire of my face for that matter, right? I can use my body language, as it is said. Kinesics happens to be a technical term, right? Kinesics is nothing but the body language that is brought into the use while you speak a language. So language is not complete. When I say complete, I have drawn an imaginary circle in the air with the help of my fingers, my indicators. So you can see the facial features, the gestures, and the postures that we make use of is supposed to be kinesics. So considering the important role played by non-verbal communication, we have to pay a lot of attention to this area as well. Proxemics, for that matter, proximity enjoyed by the interlocutors. When we have a face-to-face conversation, we come to know a lot about the other person. Gar guftagoo karo to pata chale. Gar guftagoo is face-to-face interaction, my dear friends. Gar guftagoo karo to pata chale कि जाहिल है कितने लोग पढ़ाई के बाद भी. So you can see if you interact with a person and if it happens to be a face-to-face interaction, right? So you can see proxemics plays its own role. Proximity enjoyed by the interlocutors in a communication situation, right? So you can see what happens when we are at a distance. Now this is a very wonderful arrangement, virtual platform we have. We are sitting at distances, my dear friends. So there are participants coming from different parts of India. But, this is almost like a face-to-face conversation. I can see Professor Dhumadi sitting right in front of me and giving me his own very motivating and inspiring looks. So you can see it motivates me a lot. So you can see proxemics, an immediate example for that matter. I see a very, motivating smile across the face of Professor Dhumadi. Okay. Haptics, and Dr. Samapika Das Biswas madam rightly pointed out during these pandemic times, very critical time for that matter, right? We are not able to get in touch with one another in the widest sense of the word touch. So haptics happens to be tactile communication. You put your hand on the shoulder of a person, yes, he feels that you are, yes, with him, right? So after proxemics comes haptics. It is touch communication, tactile communication for that matter. Paralanguage also plays a key role. These are all technical terminologies for that matter, but we are not expected to get threatened by these technical jargons as such. Paralanguage, I make use of a kind of music when I speak a language. You can see speakers are musicians, speakers are singers for that matter. All singers are not melodious, of course. There are a number of cacophonous singers as well. So you can see speaking a language is almost like singing, because when you utter different sentences, when you pronounce different statements for that matter, the pitch of your voice is expected to go up and down, barring judges in the court of law or priests in the churches for that matter who speak on the single tone. People belonging to law colleges, my dear friends, how the judges give the verdicts. They never express their emotions. They are expected to be neutral. They speak on a single tone, steady tone. It is supposed to be monotone. So a verdict is always given in a monotonous manner altogether. Just as, a priest, delivers his precept for that matter, sermon for that matter in a church, he is also expected to be neutral. But, people like you and me, we are not expected to be neutral. We can express our emotions and feelings liberally, freely for that matter, right? So when I speak a language, I have to see that I lift the pitch of my voice up and down. It is supposed to be making use of different tones. Language has tones, my dear friends, rising tone and falling tone and rising and falling tone. A plain statement is there, I'm a teacher. It's a falling tone. Have you done the assignment? A rising tone, right? So you can see how we use different tones. Now, we are talking about effective communication. When it comes to effective communication in English, tones play a very important role. Unfortunately, barring a handful of teachers of English and the people who know English inside out, nobody uses tones. Before tones, I think one very important thing is there that even teachers of English don't use in their day-to-day interactions. It is supposed to be stress or accent, right? I will give you one example of accent. Present is a word. It can be pronounced in two different manners. No, one is present and the second is present. If you say present, you are making use of this word as a verb. And if you say present, it becomes a noun. Just imagine a pronunciation is going to change the meaning of your word. The stress that you give, the accent that you give on a particular part of the word, which is technically called syllable, is going to change the meaning altogether. What happens in India? The teachers, who don't know the significance of tones, use their own tactic. Framing questions, for example, in English is quite difficult. It's a tall order for a number of people. They are not able to frame questions. So framing questions is a big question for a number of people in India, especially in English. So what do the people do? Just imagine, I'm going to utter a question. It is not actually a question, it's a statement. You have done the homework. This is not a question at all. This is a declarative sentence. But I have uttered this sentence with a rising tone. So I'm very smart, right? And I have converted a very simple sentence into a question. But you can see this is a very smart tactic that should not be used by the teachers, especially those who are practicing English, right? So you can see paralanguage involves the use of stress, accent. Look at the dictionaries, the first thing that I ask my students, about, it is about the personal library. You must have dictionaries in your personal libraries. If you happen to be a serious student of English, my dear friends. So then comes vocalizations. Vocalizations, we simply make noises, while we communicate with one another. Yawning, for example, if somebody yawns, it's an indication. So there's a communication, right? So vocalizations also play. Shouting, simply crying, it is supposed to be vocalizations. And then we have signs and symbols. Signs and symbols, it's a very large area that can be used for separate exposition for that matter. We keep using different signs and symbols as well. If we do this, it's a sign. You look at the traffic signals, and you stop. If the red light is burning there, right? So you can see we keep communicating with the help of signs and symbols. Now you can see the effect you see. I'm coming to the last slides of my presentation, but I will take my own time because I have been told by the organizers that I can take a little bit more time than the time that has been allocated for my presentation. You can see if you want to be effective in your communication, you must be complete in your utterances, whether you are speaking the language, if you are writing it. Completion, comprehensiveness happens to be one of the principles of effective communication. It is supposed to be one of the 8 C's for that, right? If you look at these C's, your communication must be clear. Transparency is needed. There should not be any ambiguity. Ambiguity, it happens that when you use a particular word or a phrase for that matter, you communicate, more than one meaning. It is supposed to be an ambiguous situation. And you can see how the legal practitioners, take advantage of the ambiguity. Okay. Your communication has to be correct. It must be accurate. It should be known for accuracy. The third important C that you must acquire if at all you want to be effective in your communication. It should be concise. It must be exact. You must say what you want to say, and you must be able to say what you want to say in a very economical manner, my dear friends. English happens to be a very economical language. Economical in the sense you are not expected to utter all the syllables of a particular given word with same amount of energies. I gave you one example. Present. It's not present everywhere. It's present or present. So you can see English. If you speak English, you live longer. If you speak Indian languages for that matter, if you go to South India, and see how languages are pronounced. You can see, no, I'm not blaming, of course, these languages, but it is their specialty for them. And we exhaust ourselves. What is the average age of Indians? It is not more than 65, my dear friends. And one of the factors, responsible for such low average age in India happens to be languages, right? We never speak languages. We shout languages. And if you start shouting, there cannot be communication. You have to speak a language if at all you want to communicate successfully and effectively, for that matter. You can see English happens to be a very economical language. I keep telling my students that if you speak English more, you will live longer. Because you can see, if you consider one sentence in English, you are not expected to utter all the constituents of the sentence with equal amount of energy. Okay. Now I can see another important say is confidence. You must be confident, and confidence comes to you when you have your inner energies. Once you believe in yourself and your capacities, your abilities, you have got knowledge, you have got abilities, you have got skills, and all that you have to do is to garner courage. As it was rightly pointed out at the very outset, that most of the people in India suffer from Anglophobia. We are more or less Anglophobic people. We are afraid of, English, and we feel that this is the milk of tigress, and we are not able to digest this milk. And most of the people have, a stomach disorder because of the fact that they're not able to digest this milk of tigress. But you can see, English is one of the easiest languages in the world, my dear friends. It is supposed to be the most international of all the languages in the world. Apart from that, English happens to be a sponge language. Do you know? Sponge? Sponge is a fluffy material. You put sponge into liquids, it absorbs. English happens to be, I'm making an exaggeration, I'm sorry for that, an immortal language because it is going to live longer. One speciality of English is that it absorbs words from other languages. If you look at the original words, do you know the mother of English, my dear friends? You may say, this man is asking so many questions. The mother of English happens to be one of the Germanic languages. West Germanic language happens to be the mother of English. And you can see German, tribal people came to Britain. It was called Britain then. It was not England. Angles and Saxons and Jews, for that matter. This is, of course, general knowledge. You can read it. So you can see how Britain became England. It was called because of one of the dominant tribal communities coming from Germany, my dear friends. I know that I'm taking more. I will try to conclude quickly. So you can see what I was talking about. Okay, so concreteness is another important C. Then courteous, you must be cultured because English happens to be a language that makes us more cultured and civilized, for that matter. Coherence is another very important aspect. If at all you want to be effective, you must know what cohesion is. In Marathi, it is called Susangata Samvad, Susangati, coherence, cohesion, my dear friends. Now, the other majors, I will quickly go through them because I know that, I'm a steadfast speaker. I never give up my slides and I never stop to the last slide of my presentations as well. Must be a good listener. I was very lucky, in my parents who bought me a transistor. I used to listen to BBC English. I used to listen to BBC Hindi and BBC Urdu. I still remember how they used to speak Hindi and Urdu, my dear friends. Yeah, BBC London hai. It is not ye, but yeah, right? So you can see a number of announcers were there. They still keep me inspiring and motivating. So listening plays a very important role. You must be a good listener. Now you simply see the importance of this word. It's not hearing. We hear. Hearing is spontaneous. God has not given us earlids. Teachers must be grateful to God the Almighty. Just imagine what would happen if human beings were given earlids, just as we have eyelids. We can shut the eyes and, ignore a teacher as ugly as I am. But you hear. Hearing is spontaneous. listening is deliberate. When you listen to English speeches, for that matter, you stand to gain a lot. Use non-verbal means because, as I have already told you, 90 to 93% of the gist of your communication will be communicated by non-verbal means. Be empathetic. Now you can see there are 4 types of attitudes. Number 1 is sympathy. You feel for somebody. Number 2 is antipathy. You don't like somebody. Number 3 is apathy. You neither like nor dislike a particular person. But the 4th attitude is very important. It's called empathy. You identify yourself with others. Try to understand the situation of the other person so that there is better communication between you and that person. Convey respect, of course. I need not talk much about this because etiquette and good manners contribute to effective communication. Once again, give and send feedback. Feedback plays a key role. So you can see effective communication. Once again, there are some tips that we can quickly go through. Sufficient listening and reading, basic knowledge of grammar. As I told you a while ago, that English grammar is a very flexible composition, my dear friends. I don't know why people are afraid of grammar. In the world of teachers, it is said that English grammar is easy to learn, but difficult to teach. And I have been teaching grammar for more than 25 years, my dear friends. So you can see basic knowledge of grammar is very important. Somebody raised, I saw the messages, I saw the message box, and there were questions raised to the earlier resource persons that how should we develop fluency? How should we, develop communication skills and all that, So you can see these are some of the tips that I would like to give to the people who raised questions there. Acquaintance with types of grammatical units. We keep using different grammatical units like words, phrases, clauses and sentences. So we must, it is not that we must have, elaborate understanding of grammar as such. Nodding acquaintance, for that matter, with grammar of English is quite sufficient. Vocabulary, do you know William Shakespeare? I never, complete my presentations without having referred to this great man from England called William Shakespeare, who had given up his education in the 3rd standard. He was not able to complete his primary education, my dear friends, and he became world famous dramatist, And what is the, success mantra as far as Shakespeare is concerned is vocabulary, is word power, my dear friends. So vocabulary plays a key role, Pronunciation, we have already talked about it. Internalization of English, try to internalize it, I had my education in Marathi medium school. I was born and brought up in Marathwada, just as Professor Sabnis, he comes from Marathwada region as well. So I didn't go to English medium school, my dear friends. But you can see a lot depends upon the process of internalizing English. You speak English, hear English, eat English, drink English, live English, and die English. This is called internalization of English. And barriers that you can overcome. Language barriers are there. I actually wanted to talk a lot about these things, but I'm curtailing my speech. I know quite well the condition of the organizers. Okay, and then different varieties are used. If you consider Marathi for that matter, Marathi used in Maharashtra is not uniform. If you come to Solapur, please come to Solapur and see here the Marathi in Solapur, South Indian impact. A lot of impact of Kannada and Telugu on the Marathi of Solapur. So you can see these are the hurdles that we have to overcome. Psychological barriers. Dr. Samapika has talked a lot about psychology and psychological barriers as well. There are complexes, attitudes, and whatnot. Emotional barriers are there, phobias, manias, different types of humors. In Marathi, you call it tridosh. In the Western understanding of humors, there are 4 humors. That will be a separate topic for presentation, my dear friend. Physical barriers are there because of the unfavorable environment. There are barriers in communication. We have to avoid them. Cultural barriers as well. People coming from different parts of the world, different cultural conditions for that matter. Language is culture specific. Language is molded by culture. For example, if I convert a Hindi idiom, there is something black in the pulses. A British person will not be able to understand what is the meaning of this idiom because The people in England never have pulses, right? Dal mein kuch kala hai, I cannot translate this particular idiom literally. So you can see there are cultural barriers as well. Organizational, structural barriers are there, working in an organization for that matter is a different ball game altogether. So overcome these barriers, try to follow the tips. I'm not, you say an expert in the widest sense of the word in this field. I'm a small scale teacher for that matter, but I'm a teacher to my backbone. Not backbone, but to my monkey bone for that matter. And I think I should thank the organizers wholeheartedly for having given me an opportunity of expressing myself particular wonderful topic, that is effective communication in English. Thanks a lot, all the principals from both the colleges and the coordinators, Honorable Professor Thamade sir and my dear friend Dr. Vaibhav, and of course the resource persons and all the faculty of these two colleges, delegates coming from different parts of India, and all the students as well. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'll stop sharing.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Vaibhav, sir.
Yeah.
Just
What a comprehensive speech, Dr. Manor Joshi, sir. Wonderful, wonderful beginning by Rajunaik, sir. And a really perfect ending to the webinar by your wonderful speech. It is also a kind of presidential address because you covered so many areas. The way you fused communication and English, and you covered almost everything that is there in communication, your own experiences, the way you translated different works. And since you are a Canadian who has worked in Maharashtra, well versed in so many languages, in translation, creative writing, when such a person sums up everything, that is real success of this webinar. And nearly 100 people watching there on YouTube, nearly 100 on Zoom. And it's very interesting to note that when I introduced you, there were nearly 70 members in the Zoom, and it grew significantly after you started spontaneously, perfectly, and very smooth kind of thing.
It's really wonderful because the other way around happens everywhere. In the beginning, 100 odd participants, and suddenly at the end the number goes down to 40, 50.
Correct.
So wonderful.
Even at this moment, there are 69 participants. So that is really wonderful. And the credit goes to you all speakers, wonderful speakers from 3 different areas of India. And next time you'll hopefully the part of international webinar as well, the way you have communicated yourself. So definitely your talk must have benefited the participants. Even I thoroughly enjoyed the way you spoke, your command on language, the examples that you give. For example, dal mein kuch kala hai kind of thing. So wonderful, really interesting, full of learning and full of insights. So thanks a lot for enlightening us. And I thank Samapika also, Dr. Samapika, for a very beautiful presentation with lots of animation there, and Raju Nayak sir for sharing his experiences. He was really hesitant because he's expert in literature, but I wanted him to share his own experiences, the way he came from.
hello.
To
Yes,
see how a person evolves. And even your journey, my that is a different kind of journey always. I belong to Marathi medium, etc. So communicative competence is something important, and you 3 speakers have thrown light on that. I personally thank you for respecting our invitation.